Welcome ladies and gents, Chris Andre here, a little bit late with uploading this. I was at church until after midnight. It's Orthodox Christian Easter, so if you are celebrating Christos Anesti, he is risen. I want to wish you all a very blessed year. Even for those of you that are not celebrating, I wish you all a very blessed year filled with joy, health and happiness to you and yours. But now let's talk about JOE JOYCE and Zhilei Zhang. We'll also talk about Bentley and also Moses Itauma. I'm not surprised at all by what we saw. A lot of people felt that Zhang would start well and Joyce would finish well. And I too said it would either be Zhang in the first 4 rounds or Joyce in the last 4 rounds. In the end, it was Zhang in the 6th, but ultimately it was a case of Zhang early or Joyce late. But most people out there that I saw were talking as though, yeah, Zhang will be dangerous early on, but Joyce should come through this. I was saying, no, hold on a sec. There's a real probability for either outcome to come about. Whilst I lean more towards, I think there's more of a probability of Joyce getting him late. I will not be surprised if Zhang goes and blows him out of there. And a lot of people were saying to me, Chris, what are you talking about? Joyce is indestructible. He has an amazing chin, and he showed it again tonight. But he's a human being. And Zhang is a monster puncher. But it's not just the outcome that doesn't surprise me. If you're talking about the method in which it all came about, didn't we speak about all of this in the technical breakdown video? Every little detail we spoke about played out, except for one, and we'll talk about that. Zhang came forward and he started to pat down on the lead hand of JOE JOYCE. And as I explained, he likes to do that to take away from that orthodox southpaw angle the jab of the opposing fighter. And because Joyce is so reliant on a very consistent jab, if Zhang's able to do that, he can turn it into a backhand game. And because Zhang rarely ever jabs anyway, if he stops the consistent jab coming from Joyce and it becomes a question of the backhands, Joyce's backhand is very slow. And he will shape his power shots in a particular trajectory which maximizes the probability of them landing. And we got into that in the preview. But in terms of speed, he's more often than not second best when it comes to if we both fire at the same time, who's going to land first. You can't necessarily get away with that when it comes to Zhilei Zhang, particularly because although Joyce's feet aren't slow, neither are Zhang's early on. And I explained he'd be able to match him for foot speed and be able to show him angles. And he'd be the one that would be looking very good early on. And I also explained in the preview that although everybody's talking about Zhang's backhand, one of the things people are not talking about is how good his right hook is around the guard. And I felt that he would have a lot of success with it, a lot of success with the backhand, and also a lot of success to the body, which we said again is something else he does very well. And you saw all of that play out. He landed the right hand in the first round, that right hook around the guard after he was engaging it. Then he started to bring the backhand into play immediately after it, and Joyce was all over the place. First 2 rounds, Joyce got lit up and broken up. His face, his nose looked broken. There was dark blood coming from his nose. His eyes started to swell up. He took a shellacking in those first 2 rounds. And one of the things we spoke about with Joe is that as the fight wears on, by improving the probability of shots landing with the trajectory of punches he throws, he'd be able to start putting his hands together and landing on Zhang and eventually perhaps wear him down. And you did see that he started to land a number of punches on Zhang, and the 3rd and the 4th round were actually close rounds because it's one of those situations whereby do you go with the activity and consistent work of JOE JOYCE or the sporadic heavy-handed work of Zhilei Zhang. Now in those sorts of situations, unless there's visible damage caused, unless the guy's really feeling it, I often go with activity because the punches that land. But in this particular case, Zhang was hurting him, and I actually split those rounds. So in the end, I had it 4 rounds to 1 to Zhang at the time of the stoppage. But I can see why one of the judges had it 1 round up to Joyce. Although he got battered in the first 2 rounds, he was active in the 3 rounds after that. But despite the sporadic work, comparatively talking, it was so destructive and so damaging to Joe. It was really difficult to be giving him rounds even when he was more active. So although I can understand the thought process, those heavy-handed assaults were causing damage to JOE JOYCE. And one of the areas I was very disappointed in Joe, this is the one area which didn't quite play out as I expected it to. We spoke about how Joe is very, very good with his agility. And in the Daniel Dubois fight, one of the things you'd see is that he'd throw a jab and anticipating the trigger counter that would come back. As he jab, he pulls away and leans back almost horizontally. And he's able to take away that shot. But as I explained in the preview, this happens when Joyce is premeditating an attack to defense movement. So he says to himself, I'm going to do this and then pull out. When he tries to react to what another fighter's doing, he just doesn't have the reflexes to do it. And so he was trying at points to react without preemptively defending, and he just couldn't get out of the way. And one of the problems he really had was his terrible positioning. There was a point, I can't remember if it was round 5 or 6, I think it was the last round. He was in a position whereby he's standing in front of Zhilei Zhang's backhand And he's right in line. His lead foot's on the inside. His head's on the inside of the lead shoulder. He's right in line and he's working. Joe's working, right? And Zhang's not doing anything except for covering up. But you can see that Joyce is standing right in line with that shot. It's not as though he's moving away to Zhang's right. And even then, you've got that threat because of that dangerous right hand. But if you're moving diagonally and feinting your way in and getting him rotating and turning, you're making him exert certain energy, whereby towards the end of the fight, again, it could start to come in your favor. But additionally to that, you're also staying out of the way of his big backhand. Joyce wasn't doing that. He was staying in the pocket, working, just standing there, lined up with that backhand. And so Zhang doesn't even have to go across to maximize the rotation of the shot. He just drops straight hands without even needing full rotation. Joe Joyce was getting lit up with back-to-back backhands at some points. You're sitting there, you're thinking, Joe, man, where's the positioning against the southpaw? And I know a lot of people have been saying he's only fought one southpaw in his pro career, and that was Thomas, who was a much lower level. But still, as a decorated amateur, you understand how to fight against the southpaw. It was just very poor preparation, it seemed like. And you heard him talk about how, I needed more practice. More practice? Weren't you sparring southpaws? What were you doing in there? I mean, I'm assuming you fought Zhang to try and get used to the idea of a southpaw in a bid to prepare for the Alexander Usyk fight. Surely the last year or whatever, since the Parker fight, you should have been pretty much training exclusively with southpaws if that was your plan. I don't know where he was going with this, Joe Joyce. And despite the amount of damage that Joyce took, he's a straight warrior because he was desperate for that fight to carry on. When the doctor was saying to him, how many fingers am I holding up? And Joyce was getting it right, 2 and then 1. And the doctor decided to whisper in the ref's ear and the ref waved the fight away regardless of what Joe Joyce had said. But he passed that test. He could quite easily have turned around to the ref and said, I can't see, or gotten the number wrong, and just styled it to get himself out of the fight. He was desperate for the fight to carry on. So the warrior spirit's there. The chin is still there. Any other heavyweight tonight would have been on the floor out cold if he'd eaten that many shots from a puncher like Zhang. But you still have to wonder whether Joe Joyce now has some damage, long-lasting damage that's going to come out from this. This is the sort of thing that can really soften a fighter up, because that was a brutal beating. But in terms of where they go from here, Joyce has a tough decision to make. If his choice to pursue money is at the priority, then he should take the immediate rematch and go to Macau, because now he's going to be an emerging star, Zhang, in China. So you're going to be up against an A side in China. They're going to sell out, and Macau is like 10 times the size of Vegas, right? They're going to make a lot of money out there. If that's Joe Joyce's sole priority in life, I can understand why he'll make that choice. But if his choice is legacy, I would stay away from Zhang. And it's not a revisionist position to say, oh, well, now he can't beat Zhang. Of course he can beat Zhang. Of course he can. These top guys, they can beat each other. However, the obstacle becomes much greater now, because if it's in China, which it could very well be, Warren even alluded to that post-fight, you're in a position now whereby he is sharper than you early on. You're likely to eat some big shots, even if your positioning's a lot better and your movement's a lot better. If you then have to wear him down and break him down, you didn't really put in a dent in him tonight. Let's say for argument's sake you can't hurt him, but you have to outwork him. If you have to outwork him and bring it back into your favor after you've fallen behind, and he's sporadically landing these big combination shots, and they're sporadic, you're still outworking him, the crowd are going to be going mental in Macau every time he lets his hands go. You really think Joe Joyce is going to get the decision out there? I doubt it, especially when it's such a massive emerging financial market. So if it's legacy you're more concerned with and getting that world title shot, there's Dillian White was there, he wanted to fight, that would be a better option to go down. Try and beat Dillian, try and get another notable win under your belt as well after that if possible, and put yourself into a position again to get a world title shot. It might have set you back a year, what has occurred, but ultimately you can potentially get yourself back into that position if you're patient and you have that drive. Whereas if you want to correct it instantly against Zhilei Zhang, I think you're going to have to stop him, to be honest with you. And that is no mean feat based on what we saw tonight. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents, about that and how that fight played out. In terms of what we saw on the undercard with Itauma, listen, Itauma at points, he really went for it in the first couple of rounds, trying to take this guy out of there. Very, very tough opponent in DOVBYSCHENKO, who's been in there with some recognizable names if you really follow the boxing scene quite closely. He's not a guy who's ever going to cause anybody major problems, DOVBYSCHENKO, but he's a guy who's just very, very durable. He's never been stopped. He knows how to survive. His head's made of granite. And what you saw is that Moses tried to blast him out there in the first 2 rounds, and he was really going for it, and he couldn't do it. And so after that, he seemed to gas. In that 3rd round, he seemed to start to go for a walk a little bit, and he was blowing hard. And so this would have been a very good lesson for Itauma. you are not just going to blow guys out of there. I know you're coming with all the fanfare and you're talking about breaking Mike Tyson's record, and I'm sure you saw Mike, bulldozer through a lot of people, and you're thinking, yeah, I can do this. I've been in there with some world-class fighters like Joyce, like Okoli in sparring. There's nobody else that can just stand up to me that's of a lower level. He better learn real quick that those things don't necessarily apply. And he saw that and he understood it fairly quickly. And I know there was talk about him injuring his hand. And I think there's a little bit of that where there's a PR machine into play. That's not to say he hasn't hurt his hand. I do believe he has. But you could see that he was making it quite obvious. He was grimacing. At points he was trying to hold his wrist. And I felt as though he wanted the world to know, look, this is not happening because I've hurt my hand. And he then said, to me, it looked like around round 5, he started to look uncomfortable. In the interview, he said around round 4, I hurt my hand. And then you saw Warren in the post-fight interview say, yeah, we think he hurt it in round 3. So it's sort of, I noticed it in 5, he mentions 4, but Warren mentions 3. It's almost like they're trying to take it earlier and earlier to provide the excuse of, this is why Moses Itauma couldn't get this guy out of there. There's no embarrassment in not being able to get a guy out of there. He was very, very solid. It was only a 6-round fight. He did very well. And what I liked about Itauma was the fact that he then switched it up. He realized, listen, I'm not going to take this guy out of there. I'm blowing very hard. Let me just show some languid movement, work on a few things, and show some accuracy. And you saw some accuracy, and there was some nice body work as well. And he showed some fluidity. So the talent is there for sure. He is going to have to work on certain things, though. I mean, from an offensive perspective, DOVBYSCHENKO was terrible. He offered absolutely nothing. And yet he still landed a few shots here and there on Itauma. And whilst a lot of that might have been the fact that his opponent couldn't put a dent in him at all, he couldn't hurt him at all, you're still getting clipped with certain shots and you don't want to set up bad habits. And had he been in there with a guy going for the British title, had he been in there with the likes of Adelaide, had he been in there with the likes of Fabio Wardley tonight, I think he would have been in serious trouble. Fraser Clark. These guys all would have beaten him tonight. Now, of course, you're talking about the start of his career. I wouldn't expect him to be able to beat those guys. He's a youngster, essentially. But the point I'm making is that he does have to understand, I can't get ahead of myself. I'm 18 years old. There's still a lot for me to learn. There is absolutely no guarantee that Moses Itauma will go on to become a heavyweight champion. People are talking about it as though it's inevitable. No, he's got fantastic basis to build from, superb talent, great athlete. There's a lot there going for him, but there's still a lot to learn as well. Do I believe he'll get there? Yes, I do. I think he's got brilliant talent there. But this was a great learning fight, and a lot of people use those phrases loosely. Learning fight. This really was a really good learning fight for Moses Itauma. In terms of Denzel Bentley, really devastating performance from Bentley. KIERAN Smith will be disappointed in that. He has been stopped before. He went 6 rounds of Troy Williamson, and a lot of people felt that he could be a tricky customer and cause some problems with Denzel Bentley tonight. And the truth is, when you're taken out in 45 seconds, it's very rarely a sign of your actual level. You get caught with something, you get taken out. If these guys were to fight another 10 times, he probably doesn't get taken out in 45 seconds, right? Having said that, this is the 11th time that Denzel Bentley has taken somebody out in the first 2 rounds. He's a mean puncher. You saw that Smith was sort of trying to lean on that back foot, and he's just flicking that jab out, thinking the minute he commits, I'm going to time him with that backhand. The problem is when you're telegraphing what it is that you want to do, somebody can read your tell, bluff you, and then capitalize on your attempted counter. And that's what Denzel Bentley seemed to do. He seemed to step in as Smith tried to time him with a backhand. Bentley stepped back and he threw this very short little left hook. It was almost like a slap. And there was a lot on it. And it shows you that you don't need to load up massively to take somebody's head off. Sometimes it's just about accuracy, timing, and a shot they don't see coming. And that short little left hook really buzzed him, and he knew he'd been softened up there. And did he go mad? No. He loaded up. He came low as though he was going to load up to the head, and instead he goes to the body just to engage Smith, who's already buzzed. Then he comes up with a left hook. I don't think the left hook landed. Then he throws a right hand and takes him out. And it was a devastating knockout. And it shows how Denzel Bentley is a thinking fighter. And in terms of where he goes from here, they're talking about Hamza Shiraz now. That'll be a really interesting fight. Because although Denzel Bentley is a very talented fighter and he can bang, the one area where there are question marks, in my opinion, is his physical strength. We saw how Felix Cash really manhandled him. And from a physical perspective, he really dominated him physically speaking. And Hamza Shiraz is a very, very big fighter for the weight category. So is he going to try and get hands on in the way Felix Cash did? If he does, and he eats a few shots here and there, is he going to be able to survive them? Because he's not necessarily the most evasive Hamza Shiraz. He is a very big guy at the division. Will Bentley's power carry against a man of that size? It becomes a very, very interesting fight. They're guys that used to spar a long time ago. They both would have come on heaps and bounds since then. Bentley is significantly older. He's 5 years older. And I found it interesting that it was Shiraz post-fight who said, listen, we used to spar a long time ago, but it was a very long time ago. We're different fighters now to then. You often hear fighters say that when the other guy got the better of them in sparring. So I wonder if Denzel Bentley will look at this and think to himself, you know what, I used to get the better of this guy. I could do it again. Whether that's accurate or not, who knows? But there's some history there, and I wonder how that plays out psychologically. So a fight I'd love to see. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents, about all the topics we've chatted about today. Joyce, Bentley, and of course Moses Itauma. And let me know your opinions in the comment section down below. Thanks very much for watching. Chat to you soon, ladies and gents. Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Take care. God bless.